Once upon a time, grapes were more than just a fruit. They were symbols of abundance and festivity deeply rooted in human history and culture. The cultivation of grape vines dates back thousands of years, with their influence spreading across ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Tales from around the world turn grapes into magical symbols of perseverance and unity. Through these stories and traditions, grapes have become cherished as emblems that capture the richness of life and the connections that bring people together. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Roots Reveal podcast, tracing plants through time with a dose of science. I'm your host Binish, aka Beans, and together we'll unravel the stories of plants that have shaped civilizations, ecosystems, and our understanding of the natural world. So, let's kick off our third episode and jump right in. Humans have been cultivating grapes for thousands of years, leveraging the natural fermentation process by airborne yeast and enzymes. Archaeological evidence suggests that grapes originated around 130 million years ago. The earliest known example of a fermented grape drink dates back to approximately 7000 BCE in China. Domesticated grape cultivation began around 6000 BCE in present day Georgia and spreading to the Fertile Crescent, Nile Delta, and Asia Minor by 4000 BCE. Egyptian tombs, including that of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, contains records of grape and wine use as early as 5000 BCE. Egyptians also imported superior wine from Greece, which they mixed with water. The Greeks, along with the Phoenicians, introduced grape growing to Italy, Spain, and France. Northern European climates eventually proved better for viticulture, leading the Romans to expand grape production throughout Europe by the 2nd century, with over 90 grape varieties in existence. One of the earliest mention of grapes can be found in the 13th century Ethiopian law book Feta Negest, also known as the Laws of the Kings, which serves as the foundation of Ethiopian law. This text declared that wine for the Eucharist ceremony or the Holy Communion should be made from the juice of pure grapes and not be replaced by any intoxicating drink prepared with the help of fire. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church required wine for all important Eucharist ceremonies, but this demand for wine was met by the availability of raisins, in many cases imported from abroad, which proved to be more convenient for winemaking than using fresh grapes. Viniculture, or the process of growing grapes for making wine, has a long history in Ethiopia dating back to at least early Aksumite times. Grapes were highly valued in their culture, so the land at medium altitudes where they could be cultivated came to be known as Veina Dega, which means grape highlands. Viniculture, on the other hand, was rarely practiced by the peasantry. Grapes were scarce and not easily accessible to the general population due to the absence of a market economy. Additionally, traditional viniculture in Ethiopia encountered challenges due to the limited availability of grapes throughout the year. This became particularly problematic as the country lacked a glass industry to produce suitable bottles or storage containers. Consequently, wine would ferment rapidly and could not be stored for more than a few months. As a result, viniculture in Ethiopia experienced a significant decline in subsequent years. It is possible that production was disrupted in the early 16th century due to the attempted conquest of the country by the Muslim conqueror Ahmed bin Ibrahim, although this has not been definitely established. Most of the country's grape vines appear to have been destroyed by the grape pest phylloxera in the second half of the century. Subsequent conflicts against external aggression and outbreak of the Great Famine of 1889-91 likely hindered any attempts to reintroduce wine cultivation. Instead, alternative options such as mead, also known as honey wine, and imported raisins were used as acceptable substitutes. These raisins were primarily imported for the production of communion wine. The ancient Egyptians never cultivated wild grapes, but they managed to build a successful wine industry in the Nile Delta around the 3rd dynasty, which was around 2700 BCE. Grapes were a staple food in ancient Egypt, enjoyed fresh, dried, or turned into wine. They were used in various dishes, including baked goods and beverages. Wine, known as irep or irep in ancient Egyptian, was a luxury item reserved for the wealthy and religious ceremonies. Tombs were filled with wine jars and paintings with funerary stelae depicting offerings of wine to the deceased. Wine was linked to Osiris, the god of afterlife, and the life giving forces of Nile's red sediments. While ancient Egyptian art and literature associated wine with the color red, chemical analysis of wine residues in Tutankhamun's tomb revealed that white wine was also produced. Grapes were pressed with the juice collected in storage vessels for fermentation, allowing gases to escape through reeds or holes in the lids. In ancient Palestine, grapes were a vital part of daily life, deeply woven into the fabric of agricultural and social customs. The vineyards, filled with the lush green vines, became bustling hubs of activity, especially during the harvest seasons. Entire families, from grandparents to children, participated in the grape harvest, transforming it into a communal celebration. As the harvest began, families would migrate into the vineyards, setting up temporary homes in huts constructed from branches and rushes. These makeshift dwellings, known as qasr, provided a temporary yet essential home for the weeks of the grape gathering season. The entire landscape buzzed with the sounds of laughter, singing, and the rhythmic clinking of harvesting tools. Women and children, often leading the charge, could be heard singing joyfully as they worked, their voices carrying across the vineyard. The collected grapes were used in various ways. Some were enjoyed fresh, their sweetness a delightful treat for the children who played barefoot among the vines. Others were laid out to dry, becoming raisins to be stored for the leaner months. The best grapes, however, were reserved for making wine, a critical component for both everyday meals and religious rituals. During this period, the vineyard also became a social center. Families would gather under large trees in the afternoons, engaging in lively conversations, sewing, and even entertaining guests who would stop by. The evening saw the return of the men from their daily labors, joining the rest of the family in the vineyard for a night spent under the stars. The grape harvest in ancient Palestine wasn't just about gathering fruit, it was a time of intense social bonding and cultural preservation. Traditional songs, proverbs, and stories were shared, teaching the younger generation about their heritage and the significance of the vineyards that sustained them. Therefore, this period of unity and hard work was nostalgically recalled as the time of joy and fulfillment. Vineyards were extremely common and valuable in ancient Israel, playing a significant role in its economy. Wine was a popular drink enjoyed both on regular days and during special occasions. It was often diluted with water for purification purposes and sometimes consumed when water was scarce. Wine in ancient Israel was believed to have healing properties for digestive issues and various other illnesses. A blend of wine and oil was a preferred ointment for massaging the sick. Wine was also used for preserving olives and vegetables. Red wine was frequently used for dyeing fabrics. Even mundane tasks like cleaning the house and scrubbing the floors involved a mixture of water and wine or water and vinegar. Excavations in the Negev desert in southern Israel have revealed traces of a thriving wine industry dating back over 1500 years. Researchers have identified and genetically examined two ancient grape varieties that flourish in the region's arid climate, and soon it may be possible to taste authentic Negev wine made from ancient grapes. A research grant has supported the propagation of these two ancient grape varieties, which will be planted on 5 acres of land in the Negev highlands. This initiative aims to bring the ancient Byzantine vineyards into the 21st century. Grapes and grape wines have a special meaning in Judaism. They are a symbol of abundance and are often associated with the sanctification of the Sabbath and festivals representing joy and celebrations. When wine is blessed in the Jewish tradition, it is acknowledged that it is a gift from God, playing a central role in festive and holy occasions. The yearly grape harvest and the production of wine can be seen as a metaphor for the renewal and continuity of life and tradition. In Judaism, grapes symbolize divine blessings, joy, and the close relationship between God and Jews. They represent both material abundance and spiritual fruitfulness that come from living in accordance with God's will. Grapes held significant cultural and economic importance for people in biblical times. The grapevine, for instance, is the most frequently mentioned plant in the Bible. In the Bible and all ancient Hebrew writings, grapevines are called as kaphan, originating apparently from the word kaphan, meaning to bend and curl, in reference to vine stems and tendrils. In Deuteronomy 24:21, it is advised for faithful Christians not to harvest grapes in their vineyard for the second time. Instead, they are encouraged to leave something for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. This passage emphasizes the importance of generosity and caring for those in need. It is also said in the Genesis that after the great flood, Noah planted a vineyard. This act is significant as the vine is mentioned in Deuteronomy as one of the plants in the promised land of Israel. In the New Testament, Jesus referred to himself as the true vine, highlighting his connection to God. He performed his first miracle by turning water into wine at a wedding in Cana. Even today, grapes hold symbolic meaning for Christians during Holy Communion. At the Last Supper, Jesus shared bread and wine with his disciples, representing his body and blood. He instructed them to continue this practice in remembrance of him. Overall, grapes and vineyards hold deep significance in the Bible, representing generosity, divine connection, and the sacrifice of Jesus. In the Middle Ages, grapes and wine held great importance both in terms of their economic and social impact. Wine served not only as a beverage but also as a medicine, while grapes were considered both cleansing and nutritious. The symbolism of wine in Eucharist ceremony was of utmost importance, and countless artwork showcase this connection to Christ's blood. The decorative wines found in manuscript margins were referred to as vignettes, and the artists responsible for them were known as vignetteurs. During the medieval period, people believed that gods resided within the grapes they harvested and the wines they consumed. Wine allowed them to transcend their everyday lives and commune with these deities. However, as Christianity gained influence, the Christian Church began to restrict the use of sacred wine and differentiate it from secular wine. It was common for priests, monks, friars, and nuns of the Catholic Church to be the primary suppliers of wine to the masses during the medieval period. They were heavily involved in cultivating vineyards, harvesting grapes, and fermenting them. From the fall of the Roman Empire until the Renaissance, church workers not only provided wine to the average European but also played a crucial role in selecting and spreading high quality grape varieties. Historians often argue that as Christianity spread across Europe, so did vineyards and wine-making practices. Benedictine and Cistercian monks helped Europe grow wine. In the 12th century, Cistercians established 120 convents in Portugal and taught their congregations how to cultivate grape vines and produce wine. Kings and the feudal lords of the medieval period also had vineyards and made wine, but they often donated large portions of the land to the church for vineyard use. The process of winemaking involved the participation of ordinary people who would gather together during the autumn grape harvest to pick and process the grapes. But was medieval wine similar to the wine we have today? In terms of taste and aroma, it generally fell short of modern standards. During the Middle Ages, wine were not stored in corked bottles since corks and glass wine bottles had not yet been invented. Dry wines had a tendency to spoil quickly when exposed to air and lacked sulfides. Some historians believe that even the highest quality wines produced in Europe at that time were likely inferior to those made in ancient Rome and Greece. This was because medieval wines were often infused with resin stored in clay vessels, providing some level of protection. Peasants and workers from the lower classes used to consume wine that had been stored in animal hides. Unfortunately, this practice resulted in the wine acquiring a terrible taste resembling vinegar. Despite its unappealing flavor, this wine was still considered more hygienic than drinking pure water. Consequently, people would dilute it with water and consume approximately 3 liters of this mixture each day. They even included wine with their breakfast. Art has a unique way of transforming everyday objects into profound symbols, and grapes are a perfect example. Grapes have been a symbol of life's richness and abundance, a theme vividly captured in various artistic traditions. The painting Jack of Grapes by Erhard Schön, created during the Renaissance period, depicts a standard bearer holding a banner adorned with grapes. The presence of grapes in the artwork likely holds a symbolic significance representing abundance, prosperity, and the fruitful rewards of hard work. This symbolism may reflect the values and aspirations of the individuals or organizations associated with the banner. The 17th century painting by the Italian painter Caravaggio's depiction of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine, features the god holding a bunch of grapes, symbolizing abundance and the pleasures of life. In the painting Grapes of Canaan, the French painter James Tissot depicts the biblical story of the spies sent to Moses to scout the land of Canaan, who brought back a cluster of grapes as a proof of the land's fertility. The Vintage by Francisco de Goya, a Spanish romantic painter from the late 19th century, depicts grape harvesters celebrating the harvest. It beautifully captures both joy and hard work that is inherent in grape cultivation. In Greek and Roman mythology, wine is seen as a divine gift from gods, with Dionysus and Bacchus as the deities associated with its power. Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and fertility, is credited with teaching mortals the art of wine making, turning grapes into a sacred, transformative elixir that bridged the mortal and divine realms. The grape wine sacred to Dionysus symbolized the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Even Dionysus' own birth is tied to wine, as he was rescued by Zeus and hidden in the god's thigh until he was ready to be born. The Romans embraced this mythology through their own god Bacchus, who was celebrated with wild, wine soaked festivals called Bacchanalia, honoring the transformative power of the grape. Have you ever wondered where the expression sour grapes originated? The phrase originated in Aesop's fables in a story called The Fox and the Grapes. In the story, a fox sees a juicy bunch of grapes hanging from a trellised vine and desires them. After several unsuccessful attempts to reach the grapes, the fox realizes that he will never be able to get them and walks away. To save his reputation and protect his ego, the fox claims that the grapes were sour anyway and that he never truly wanted them. The moral of the story is that it is easy to despise what you cannot have. This story shows how people sometimes criticize or belittle something they want but can't have as a way to rationalize their failure and protect their ego. Grapes, commonly associated with abundance and celebration, assume more profound and symbolic roles in different folklore stories. In the story of the 12 brothers from Grimm's fairy tales, grapes are used as a motif. Although they are not the main focus, the heroine must gather grapes along with completing other tasks in order to rescue her brothers. The grapes here symbolize a challenging obstacle that she must overcome as a part of her quest. The legend of the grape is a Basque folk tale. It tells the story of the origin of grape wines and is centered around a fairy who gave grape wines to the region as a gift to the people. The fairy also taught them how to cultivate and make wine, thus highlighting the magical and benevolent nature of grape cultivation. The Salamana grapes is an Italian folk tale that tells the story of a king who had a daughter who was incredibly beautiful and ready for marriage. Three princes from neighboring kingdoms fell in love with her, but the king could not decide which one to choose. So he came up with a challenge. The prince who brought back the best gift after 6 months would marry his daughter. The three brothers embarked on separate journeys to find the perfect gift. The oldest brother stumbled upon a magic carpet that would instantly transport its owner to any place. The middle brother purchased a magic telescope that could see great distances, even through walls. And the youngest brother bought three magic grapes that had the power to revive a dying person. When the three brothers reunited, the middle brother used his telescope and discovered that the princess was on her deathbed. The oldest brother used his magic carpet to whisk them away instantly to the princess. And finally, the youngest brother fed her the magic grapes, which brought her back to life. Now, each brother claimed that his gift was the most important in saving the princess, leading to a heated argument. To prevent further conflict, the king decided to marry his daughter to a fourth suitor who arrived empty handed, thus resolving the issue without favoring any of the three brothers. This tale highlights the importance of cooperation, recognizing the value of each contribution in a collective effort, and how material possessions alone cannot determine someone's worthiness. The Gofford Grapevine, written by Charles Chesnutt and published in 1887, is a short story included in his collection The Conjure Woman. This collection delves into the themes of race, folklore, and supernatural in South America after the Civil War. The Gofford Grapevine is significant for its use of African American vernacular and its early depiction of African American folklore in American literature. Chestnut uses the frame narrative and the character of Uncle Julius to give voice to African American experiences and cultural traditions in a period of significant social change. The Gofford Grapevine tells the story of John and Annie, a couple from North America. Annie's poor health prompts them to move to the south and begin a vineyard as they believe the change in climate will benefit her. They found a beautiful but neglected plantation in North Carolina with an old grapevine that seemed perfect for their plans. As they explored the vineyard, they met an elderly African American man named Uncle Julius. He warned them that the grapevine was goofed or bewitched. Intrigued, John and Annie asked Uncle Julius to tell them more. Uncle Julius began his tale. Long ago, before the Civil War, the vineyard belonged to a planter named McAdoo. To stop his slaves from stealing the grapes, McAdoo hired a local conjure woman named Aunt Peggy. Aunt Peggy cast a spell on the grapevine, making it deadly to anyone who ate the grapes. One day, a slave named Henry unknowingly ate some of the bewitched grapes. To save him, Aunt Peggy cast another spell. This new spell saved Henry's life, but had a strange effect. His health and strength would wax and wane with the seasons. When the grapes were in season, Henry became strong and vigorous, but when they were out of season, he grew weak and sickly. McAdoo took advantage of this, selling Henry at a high price during his strong months and buying him back cheap when he was weak. The plantation and the vineyard eventually fell into ruin during the Civil War, and the grapevine was left to grow wild. Uncle Julius suggested that the vineyard was still cursed and buying it would bring bad luck. Despite the warnings of a curse on the vineyard, John decided to purchase it anyway, believing it to be mere suspicion. He later discovered that Uncle Julius had been using the vineyard to make a living by selling grapes. John and Annie embarked on their new journey on the vineyard, unsure if the curse was real or just a clever story spun by Uncle Julius. Overall, the story weaves together these themes to emphasize the moral that it is crucial to understand, respect, and value local cultures and traditions. It also illustrates that exploiting people and nature for personal gain ultimately leads to ruin. Grapes have always held a special place in history, symbolizing abundance, celebration, and hard work. From their early cultivation and the production of wine in ancient times to their symbolic presence in religious rituals, literature, and art, grapes have become an integral part of human culture. They can be found in folklore and legends, often representing challenges, blessings, and the strength of unity. Whether used as a metaphor in stories or as a sacred element in religious ceremonies, grapes transcend their everyday role, emphasizing the profound connections between nature, human accomplishments, and cultural heritage. Thank you for listening to the Roots Reveal podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform and sharing our episodes with family, friends, and colleagues. If you have any feedback or suggestions, reach out to me at hello@rootsrevealed.org. Remember to keep exploring your roots and embracing the diversity of our shared human experience. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.